aboard our next stop for Adventures in Knowledge. Let's dive into the impact of one specific volcanic eruption and how it affected the world. So let's begin with the facts around the eruption itself. On April 5th, 1815 in Indonesia, the volcano Tambora erupted with a volcanic eruption index of 7. Now, most of us don't know the volcanic eruption index that well. I certainly did not. A scale of 7 is basically an eruption that occurs only once or twice every 1,000 years. It's huge. To really give you an idea of how big this volcanic eruption really was, first of all, this volcano was erupting from April 5th all the way until April 11th. That whole time, spewing different things, different amounts of explosions. It was big. So big that you could hear the explosion 1,600 miles away. The eruption of Tambora created a volcanic winter. Now, the volcanic winter occurred because so much ash was blown into the atmosphere that it was actually blocking sun's rays and causing a cooling effect on the planet. The northern hemisphere especially was impacted by this, so much so that 90,000 people died either directly or indirectly from the cooled temperatures. That doesn't even include the number of people who died from the initial eruptions. Beyond the cooling effect killing people due to starvation and crops not growing, it had some serious historical impact. Historical event number 1. Okay, so like I was saying, the crops were dying. At the time, people were mostly getting around through using horses, and horses mostly were eating oats. Now, unfortunately, this meant it was more expensive to have a horse because oats were harder to come by and it was more pricey. It's like higher gas prices today, only oats were expensive. Now, these circumstances of trying to find other ways to get around without having to use a horse or spend as much money led to a German man named Karl Drais who decided, I'll invent something. So he invented the bicycle. Now people ride bicycles all the time. I mean, you learn how to ride one when you're a kid. They're a pretty normal part of everyday life for most of the world. Bikes. Tambora led to the invention of bikes. From historical inventions to historical battles, Tambora had a great impact on the world. For instance, Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated on the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. This was just a few months after Tambora had erupted. A contributing part of Napoleon's loss was the heavy rain. At the time, there was a lot of heavy rain, and it was leading to a lot of mud. Historians believe that Napoleon delayed his troops because he was worried that the mud would slow down his artillery and soldiers. However, this delay gave the Prussian and British military enough time to unite and blow a crushing defeat to Napoleon. So some may think, okay, it's heavy rain, not a big deal, that happens. Except it was unusually heavy rain for the season, and geologists were studying it. Not then, geologists have been studying it more recently, and they have found that Tambora was very likely the cause of that specific inclement weather. So, a volcanic eruption a few months before in Indonesia led to Napoleon's defeat. On to historically significant event number 3, my favorite, because if you're a geek or a nerd like me, you're gonna love this one. The summer of 1816 was again known as the coldest summer on record. It was crappy weather, storms, everything looked kind of gloomy and depressing. It was pretty bad. Now, during that specific summer, Mary Shelley and her husband Lord Byron were vacationing at Lake Geneva. The weather was so bad, so instead of doing the usual summer outdoor activities, her and her friends decided to have a competition to write a short story. She is the only one who actually completed her story, but Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. The gloomy weather probably helped inspire the story of Frankenstein, and it's what kept her inside to write it. Frankenstein is known as the first sci-fi novel, so the whole entire field of sci-fi began from a volcanic eruption. The volcanic eruption of Tambora alone ended up creating a world with bicycles, sci-fi, and Napoleon's defeat. If one volcano can do that much, imagine all the things climate change is impacting today. Well, that's all we've got for the facts and impact of this specific climate thing, but check us at our next stop, and Adventures in Knowledge. See you then!